So back in June of 2024, I had the crazy idea to download an app called Nomad Sculpt. I just wanted to learn 3D. It looked super fun. I derped around with it for a few minutes and definitely wasn't pretty at first.
We all got to start somewhere. I tried to make a little character. It definitely wasn't anything like what I saw in the tutorials, but that's okay. And with starting any new medium, you got to be bad first. You got to get a lot of really bad projects out of the way, because without those bad projects, you're not gonna have any of the experience to do anything cool. So I kept trying. I spent probably the first month or two just on these first couple of just little derpy projects, just trying to make something that looked like something. And so I kept plugging away. I tried to make a little mannequin and just following some guides online, following some tutorials. I was able to finally sculpt this Lilith, which I thought was pretty cool, but I had to do the old hide her hands trick, so I decided I needed to learn how to sculpt hands. So that was my first attempt. I then started learning some of the more complex features of 3D, like curves and arrays, and I made this, which I then turned into my first xenomorph. I finally made a mannequin that looked cool, and using that mannequin I made before and the hands that I made before, I turned it into this cool xenomorph. But I thought I could do better, so I made another one. And this one turned out super cool. This was the first time I felt like I really was getting somewhere with 3D, and I wanted to push it even further. I then tried to make a Balrog. Didn't end up finishing it, but this is as far as I got. Then I decided to try Blender. Everyone tells me to make a donut. I made my way halfway through the donut tutorial, got kind of frustrated and gave up on that, but then I tried to make a mannequin in Blender as well, just trying to learn the features of PC versus iPad. I was able to make a starship. It's very basic, but I felt like I was getting somewhere. I added some lights in the background and it looked kind of cool. I also followed a tutorial online to make this little bottle. I used some of the shaders to make it actually like a glass transparent texture. Then I had the idea to take one of my original ideas, turn it into a sculpture, and then turn it into a painting. So I sculpted this frog in Nomad, brought it into Blender, and then used that composition to paint this painting. Now I know my anatomy can also use some work, so I did this little study of my own hand just by looking at my hand and sculpting it as I saw it. I then wanted to study some muscle anatomy, and I did not use myself as the reference for this one, but I sculpted a human mannequin just trying to study up on muscles. I tried to make a face bust of Gandalf. I tried to make a dragon. It didn't turn out quite as I was hoping, so I tried again. I ended up making something that was pretty cool, so I then took that dragon, I put it in Blender. I started experimenting with some crowd simulation and building setup. I made this whole scene. I got some help from a friend to figure out some lighting and some clouds and how to make it look more interesting, and then I turned that into another painting. And this one is actually a commission that I did for a comic book cover, and I thought it turned out super dope. The client really liked it, and I thought it was a good start to getting 3D into paintings. I had a lot of Comic-Con events, and so I didn't have time to sculpt very much over the next couple of months, but here and there I decided to try some bust sculptures. I made this Daredevil, and then I wanted to try making one in Blender using more geometric hard surface shapes rather than just kind of organic modeling. And I thought it turned out pretty cool. Wasn't exactly what I was going for, but I felt like I was getting somewhere. I was able to make a cool helmet and a shoulders up bust of him, and I had a little animation. I went back to Nomad Sculpts, tried the same thing with this cool Gwen sculpture, and I really, really love that one. Back in Blender, I wanted to try and make some of these God Ray lights. I followed a couple of tutorials online, just learning about nodes and shaders and just playing with sliders to get it to look cool. And then I went back to modeling, and finally I made something in Nomad Sculpt that I was extremely proud of. I thought this was probably the best thing I'd ever made, and I still think it might be. It's one of my favorite sculptures so far. I decided to make a painting of it, and so I took a model, put it in Blender, and then again working with the shaders and positioning the camera angle, I made this reference, and this is probably the coolest thing I've made in Blender yet, and so I used that to make an oil painting. And so I just transferred the reference from the Blender sculpt and I used that to make this painting using oils on canvas medium, and I ended up selling the original painting, so that's the first money I made using digital 3D. I took that idea and had another idea for a Lord of the Rings inspired painting, so I made this Shelob, and I brought her into Blender as well after I'd posed her. Did the same kind of idea that I did with my first xenomorph, and I just pushed it a little further, added some more like rocks and boulders, added a little Samwise and more lighting, and I made a super cool render of that, and then used that as a reference for another oil painting. I ended up making this big 24 by 36 masterpiece of an oil painting. I think it's probably some of my best work yet. I am absolutely super proud of how it turned out.
So that's my journey so far. That's about 6 months of work. What are some of your creative goals for 2025? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys are excited to learn. Big thank you to everyone who's been following along as well. I couldn't do this without you guys. I just feel so grateful to be able to be a full-time artist and to pursue my crazy dreams and passions. And again, thank you all so much.